Namaste and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Bhagavad Gita class. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, we meditate on you who were made known to Partha by the Lord Narayana himself, you who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa, you the goddess who rains down the nectar of Advaita, non-dualism, in 18 chapters, you the destroyer of relative existence. We worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the supreme delight of his mother Devaki, and the slayer of the demons Kamsa and Chanur. We adore that supremely blissful Madhava, Krishna, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this evening we will continue our study of the Bhagavad Gita, and we are to take up the 10th verse of the 18th chapter. And so let me go back over the verses of the 18th chapter that we covered, the first through the 9th, just to give context. And so as several of the chapters of the Gita do, this chapter begins with a question from Arjuna. He asks for what the difference is and what the truth is about sannyasa and tyaga, two Sanskrit words, both of which mean renunciation. But he's making a distinction between sannyasa and tyaga. Sannyasa means renunciation, giving up everything. It also refers to the institution of monasticism, formal renunciation. And tyaga can mean formal renunciation, but it is a more general term for renunciation, detachment, etc., vairagya. And so that is the general distinction that Sri Krishna makes in his answer, and we can understand that that was the general distinction that Arjuna had in his mind when he asked the question about what is sannyasa, what is tyaga. I want to know the truth of these in some detail. And so then Sri Krishna begins by saying that the learned understand sannyasa to be giving up those actions which are done with the idea of a reward, those actions which are prescribed by the scriptures, that if you do this, you will get a particular reward in this life or in the next life. And then he says that the adepts call that tyaga, that type of renunciation, to be the renunciation of the fruits of all action, the results of all work as tyaga. So sannyasa means giving up those actions which have a desire, which are motivated by desire. And tyaga, he says, means the renunciation of the fruits of all action. And then he goes on to say in the third verse that some learned people say that all action is beset with evil, and therefore it should be given up. And some others say that even if you give up action, you shouldn't give up yajna, dana, tapa, that is, sacrifice, charity, and austerity or spiritual practice. And so I went over that last time. And so he says that his firm conclusion is that one should not give up yajna, dana, tapa, that is, sacrifice, charity, and austerity or a spiritual practice, because those are considered to be purifiers of humanity. They purify the mind and the body. Then he says that going on to verse 6, but even these actions, yajna, dana, tapa, sacrifice, charity, and spiritual practice, even these should be done without a view to the fruits of the practice. That is, even there, even in spiritual practice, even in gift giving, even in sacrifice, we should do them without a view to the fruits of the action. He says, this is my firm and my best opinion. Nishtitam matamuttamam. This is my firm conviction and my best conviction. And so he says, then he comes to the description of the three gunas with regard to giving up work. And so he says that the abandoning of the prescribed actions, those actions which one should do every day, is not justifiable. Giving up the prescribed actions through delusion is declared to be a result of tamas. So tamasic relinquishment of action is giving up action through delusion. Then in verse 8, he says that should one relinquish actions from fear of physical suffering, thinking this action is painful or difficult, such a one, having resorted to renunciation due to rajas, will surely not acquire the fruit of renunciation. So the relinquishment of work out of delusion, that's tamasic, due to tamoguna, tamas. And that renunciation, which says, this work is difficult. Why should I go to so much trouble? Let me give it up. It's just a problem. I'll give it up. So that's due to rajas, because rajas, again, is the quality where you're always seeking pleasure, seeking to avoid pain. And so this work is difficult. Well, why should I bother? I'll give it up. That is rajasic renunciation. And then in verse 9, he says that the work is to be done, karyam iti, one who says karyam, this karma, this action should be done, karyam, and I do it because it's supposed to be done. It doesn't matter whether it's difficult or easy, whether it's pleasurable or painful, but this is something that should be done. But I give up the fruits of the action and attachment to the action itself. That's sattvic relinquishment. So again, tamasic relinquishment of action is giving up actions out of delusion, not knowing why you're doing it, just doing it out of confusion. Rajasic is giving up difficult work because it's difficult, only because it's difficult, not because it should be given up, but just, this is too much trouble, I'll give it up. That's Rajasic. And Sattvic, the Sattvic person does work just because it's to be done. This is the work, this work should be done, so I'll do it, pleasurable or painful. But I give up the fruits of the action. And so that relinquishment of the fruits of action is Sattvic. So now we come to verse 10 and continue from there. So 10 says, Na dveshtya kushalam karma kushale nanushajjate tyagi sattva samavishto medhavi chinna samshayaha. So here, kushalam karma na dveshti, kushale na anushajjate. So the tyagi, the person of renunciation who na kushalam karma dveshti, who doesn't hate unpleasant work. The one who doesn't hate unpleasant work, kushale cha na anushajjate, and who is not attached to pleasant work. That is, let me just take the pleasant work, let me give up the unpleasant work. No. The person of renunciation who doesn't hate unpleasant work, nor is attached to pleasant work, sattva samavishto, such a one having entered fully into, being imbued fully with sattva. Such a person is fully sattvic, who doesn't hate unpleasant work and who doesn't, who's not attached only to pleasant work. He's fully engaged. He's fully immersed through and through. Some are Vishta, the Vishta immersed in, Avishta through and through, and Samavishta completely through and through, completely immersed in Sattva. He's a Medhavi, one who is possessed of the highest intelligence, the clearest intelligence, Chinna Samshaya, and who is devoid of all doubts. So the running translation given here is the man of renunciation, or the person of renunciation, who has become fully imbued with sattva, who is enlightened and who is free from doubts, does not hate unbefitting action, nor does he become attached to befitting activity. Now, I don't like this interpretation of Madhusudana, with all due respect, because he was a great sage. But all the commentators have not agreed with him either. And so here he says that one who doesn't hate unbefitting action, nor is attached to befitting action. And so he's just indifferent towards action that should not be done, as well as to action which in ordinary society is to be done, but he gives up both. But no, that doesn't seem to be the meaning here. The meaning, the clearer meaning seems to be one who doesn't hate unpleasant action. So not unbefitting. Unbefitting means it shouldn't be done. But that doesn't seem to be the meaning. The meaning seems to be one who doesn't hate, because Sri Krishna is saying that one should not give up the work itself, but the attachment to the work. So one who doesn't hate unpleasant work, it should be done. It's unpleasant, I don't like to do it, but I do it because it's to be done. And it's not attached to pleasant work. Oh, I want that work for myself because that's pleasant. I get a lot of enjoyment. So let me try to claim that for myself and pass off the unpleasant work on others. No, it does work because it's to be done, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. So the person of renunciation who has become fully imbued with sattva, who is possessed of the highest intelligence, the clearest insight, medhavi, and who is free from doubts, chinna samshaya, doesn't hate unpleasant action, nor is he attached to pleasant action. So that, of course, we see the logic behind this, the spiritual logic behind this, spiritual and psychological logic, that we all tend to want to do the pleasant things and want to avoid doing the unpleasant things. And so this doesn't mean that, no, you should want the unpleasant things and not want the pleasant things. No, that's not the idea. The idea is to do that which needs to be done, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Don't do it with regard to its pleasing or unpleasing qualities. Do it because it's there to be done. If this is your duty, if this is something that should be done, then just do it without regard to that. This realm, this world of samsara in which we live, is the world of the pairs of opposites, the world of the dvandvas, the dualities. And so here, if we want to find our way through make our way through the world of dualities and get to the other side, to the reality which is beyond the pairs of opposites, then we have to be steady in the midst of the polarities, the dualities of experience. If we are shaken by the waves of the world, then we can never progress. We can't even lead a happy, ordinary life in the world, what to speak of a spiritual life. And so we have to learn to make our way through life without being attached to the pleasant nor afraid of the unpleasant, which again doesn't mean that we should seek the unpleasant, nor does it mean that if we're suffering, if we're sick, or if we're in pain, we shouldn't seek a remedy. No, that we can do. But the experiences that come to us, we should, as far as possible, learn to keep an even keel and not be pushed around by our experiences. The person who is overly disturbed by the pairs of opposites, a little change in temperature, it gets a little warm and they find it unbearable. It gets a little cool, that's unbearable. The things that are unpleasant, they find that unbearable. They run towards the pleasurable. They try to run away from every unpleasant thing. Well, no, we can't even lead a normal life doing that. And so the yogi tries to be steady in the midst of the pairs of opposites. Again, not by torturing himself so that he becomes immune to pain because he's inflicted so much pain on himself that it no longer bothers him. No, that's not the idea. But the idea is to remain steady in the ordinary experiences of life. But it is also why those who go in for austerities, like the yogis who to take a bath in an ice cold stream, the yogis who get accustomed to living in the cold of the Himalayas, sometimes naked. There are still yogis who who live in the Himalayas naked, bearing with cold, and those who bear with the intense heat of the plains without trying to protect themselves from it. It's this idea. That may be an extreme practice, but Swami Vivekananda said when he was teaching in this country that you people in this country, he said, you people in this country need to know that there are such people, that there are those who seek to go beyond even the physical pairs of opposites so that the mind will remain steady. So no, we don't all have to do that, and we can't all do that. And we would exhaust most of our energy if we tried to do that. So for most of us, it's better just to try to control the mind and the ordinary experiences of life. But we should know that there are those who take to an extreme path and who are determined that I'm not going to be bothered by heat, I'm not going to be bothered by cold, even extreme cold. And so they go to extremes in order to do that. When I lived at Mayavati, there was a German devotee who stayed with us for over a year. I think he lived with us. He got special permission to live with us for a year. And usually that's not given to anyone, but he got special permission through a Swami he was very close to. And he was devoted to a Swami who lived in Rishikesh at that time. He's passed away now. Mastaram Baba was his name. And this Mastaram Baba used to sit naked, even in the wintertime. He would sit naked and completely unconcerned with the cold. Everybody else would have on warm clothes, woolen sweaters, hats and scarves and everything to protect themselves from the cold. And he would be naked, unperturbed. But this friend of mine who used to go to see Mastaram Baba once in a while, he went once in the winter and said that Mastaram Baba had a new disciple, a young man, who was in training. And so he was sitting there naked also, but freezing to death, shaking all over, turning blue, and absolutely miserable. So he had not yet learned to bear the cold as Mastaram Baba had. But Mastaram Baba and such yogis do it again in order to make the mind steady so that they're immune to the discomforts of the body. So again, not that we have to do that, but it's good to know that there are such people, because then it gives us the encouragement, well, if they can do that, then let me bear with the little inconveniences I have in my life, the little discomforts I have. So, so again, um, uh, we try to go beyond the pairs of opposites. So then we come to verse 11. Nahi deha bhrita shakyam tyaktum karmanyasheshatah yastu karma phala tyagi satyagithyabhidhiyate. Nahi deha bhrita shakyam tyaktum karmani asheshatah. So it's not possible, shakyam, it's not possible for a deha bhrita, for one who holds the body. Deha bhrita, one who is the holder, the holds up the deha, the body. That's a strange expression at first, that the one who holding as though you're holding a heavy weight. One who holds the body as if they're holding a heavy weight. It's not possible for such a one to give up actions completely. Karmani tyaktum karmani asheshadaha. It's not possible to give up all actions completely. But this deha bhrita, deha bhritri, one who holds up, carries the one who carries the body. That makes sense if a person has ever had, even momentarily, an experience of being completely free from body consciousness. Not in the dream state, because there we have a dream body which we carry around. But if in the waking state, in meditation or in some for whatever reason, one enters into a state where one is conscious of the world, conscious as we are now, but suddenly the awareness of the body disappears. Then one feels that the whole weight of the universe has been lifted from one. And then we understand that the weight of the whole universe is sitting on this. This right here is what attaches us to, which keeps us in samsara. This is this is carrying the whole weight of samsara on it. Everyone's body, for them, is carrying the whole weight of the universe of samsara. And so if we become free for a time of body consciousness, suddenly we feel that the weight of the whole universe has been lifted from us. And we feel, for the first time, we feel completely weightless. We feel completely free. Such people have an extraordinary experience. Then we realize that, yes, I am a deha bhrita, deha bhritri, one who is carrying the burden of this body. So for one who carries the burden of the body, it's not possible to give up, to relinquish all actions completely. Yastu karma phala tyagi, but one who is a renouncer of the fruits of action, satyagi ityabhidhiyate. Such a person is truly called a tyagi, a renouncer. So as long as we are possessed of a body, as long as we are the carriers of this body and the weight of the universe, we can't give up all actions completely. Why? Because we have to sustain life. If I haven't realized the highest truth, this is the only instrument that will allow me to realize the highest truth. If I don't take care of this and I give it up prematurely, what happens? I don't become free. I lose this body, but I have to come back again and start over, take another birth in another body. And so just giving up the body in death does us no good. All of us will die someday, but as long as the body is viable, as long as the body is continuing its life, then we should take care of it. And we have to take care of it in order to continue our life. If I don't feed myself, if I don't clothe myself, unless I'm like Mastaram Baba, so unless I feed myself, clothe myself, house myself from the elements, etc., then I can't continue to live. And for most people, feeding, clothing, housing oneself, taking care of oneself from sickness and so forth requires money, and money requires a job. And so for most people, it's necessary to have a means of support, and a means of support means working. And so giving up work altogether is not possible for that reason, and it's not even possible for those who have who can live independently of income, either because they are wealthy, they have money in the bank that they can live off of, or they have simple needs and live in an ashram where all of their needs are taken care of, and they don't have to worry about sustaining the body. They have food provided, shelter, and simple clothing provided. Either way, even then, we have to do something to maintain the body. We have to eat. And along with that come other responsibilities wherever we live. And so the maintenance of the body, as Sri Krishna says in chapter 3, it's around verse 8 of chapter 3, he says, Sharira yatra pichate na prasiddhyera akarmanaha, that even the maintenance of the body is not possible without doing work. And so everyone has to work. So since the running translation goes, since it is not possible for actions to be given up entirely by one who holds on to a body, therefore he, on the other hand, who renounces the results of actions is called a man of renunciation. The translation is correct, but the English is not good. So the idea is that since it's not possible for actions to be given up entirely by one who has a body, who holds a body, it's necessary to do action. But one who gives up the fruits of action, who renounces the fruits of action, that is the desire for the fruits of action, not actually giving up the fruits, but giving up all attention and desire for the fruits, such a one is a relinquisher. So that is real relinquishment, not giving up action, because you can't give up action until you have attained to the highest state. Once you've gone beyond the sense of being the karta, the doer, the agent of action, then yes, you give up, then action itself falls away from you. You do nothing. Even if others see you apparently acting, you see that you do absolutely nothing. You're free from action then. But until then, everyone has to act. But a true relinquisher is not one who tries to give up the action itself, that being impossible until realization, but one who gives up the desire for the fruits of action. So this is a theme which comes again and again throughout the Gita. It's in the second chapter, the third and fourth chapter, fifth chapter, and in other places through the Gita, and it comes again here in the last chapter, the idea of giving up the fruits of action. And so it's one of the central themes of the Gita. Another central theme is non-attachment. But non-attachment and giving up the fruits of action, those are two sides of the same coin. Non-attachment for Sri Krishna means non-attachment to the fruits of action and to the action itself. And so, again, as I've explained on various occasions, the idea of giving up the fruits of action or giving up attachment to the fruits of action seems impossible, because all of our actions are normally motivated by desire. I do something because I have some desire for an outcome. Even the duties we have to do, which that we're not fond of doing, but which we have to do because it's part of our responsibility, even that is desire motivated. I think that I don't like to do this, but I'm going to do it because of this. And so every action we do has a motivation. There's a desire behind it. Even our spiritual practice is motivated. So giving up the fruits of action seems impossible, but it's not impossible. If what we need to do is to learn to focus on the action itself and to forget about the fruits of action. There's a bumper sticker that used to be very, very common and very popular, which said, taking the words from a song in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, hi ho, no, I O, so off to work I go. That's from the song in this Disney's children's film, hi ho, it's off to work we go. So this taking off on that I-O, I-O, so off to work I go. That's the reason why I'm working, because I owe money. And so, yes, if you, all of us have monetary responsibilities, and so we have to fulfill those. But instead of thinking in terms of that, just think in terms of doing the work, because first of all, you have to do something. You can't be without work even for a moment. Kshanamapi. Not, Sri Krishna says in the 3rd chapter also, Nahi kashchik kshanamapi jatutishtatya karmakrit. No one, even for a moment, can be without action. So realizing that I have to do something, so let me do that which should be done. Because even by saying I'm not going to do that, I'm making an action. I'm making a decision. I'm doing something else. So even that is an action. So do that which you have to do that which you give, that which you have to give to the world, as Swami Vivekananda says. But to do it because it has to be done, and focus on the doing itself, not on what I'm going to get out of it. So as I've said on various occasions in this class, that when at the end of the week you've done your work for your boss, and the boss gives you a paycheck at the end of the week or the end of the month, you don't have to say, well, no, I'm just working for the work itself, not for the fruits of action, so you keep that. No, you don't have to say that. You take the check, but that was not your prime motivation. Yes, you need the check. Yes, you have to pay your bills. All of those are practical considerations. But your focus is on doing the work because, first of all, something has to be done. And then let me use the work as a means of controlling my mind, as a means of becoming more unselfish, as a means of developing my patience, as a means of developing dedication, steadiness, as a means of controlling my impulses, that I don't want to be doing this, I want to be doing all sorts of other things. No, this has to be done, so I'm going to focus on it. So doing the work for the work's sake means doing it because you find in the work a value in the work itself, and leave the fruits to themselves. So no one wants to fail at something they do. Not even the yogi wants to fail. They don't set out trying to fail. But as Sri Krishna says, the yogi gives up attachment to success or failure. So what does that mean? It means you do the work to the best of your ability, because by doing it to the best of your ability, you become a better person. It helps you, just the work itself. And then if, in spite of doing it to the best of your ability, the work fails, then be unperturbed, because you weren't doing it for the fruits. Now, usually if you do the work to the best of your ability, the fruits will come out good, better than if you are haphazard in your work. But even for someone who does the work to the best of their ability, there are times when things fail. And so the yogi is not perturbed by that, not elated by success, and not disturbed by failure. And so learning to do the work without attachment to the fruits. So again, since it is not possible for actions to be given up entirely by one who holds on to a body, who supports the whole universe through this body, therefore, he should renounce the fruits of action, because one who relinquishes the fruits of action is truly the renouncer, not one who just avoids work, but one who gives up the fruits of action. So then we come to verse 12. Anishtam ishtam mishram cha trividham karma phalam Bhavatyatyāginām pretya natu sannyasinām kvachit. So here he says that anishtam, ishtam, mishram cha trividham karmana phalam. There are three types of fruits of fruits of action, or fruits of action fall into three categories. The ishtam, that which is desirable, that is the good fruits. Anishtam, the undesirable, that is the bad fruits. And mishram, a mixture of the two. So whenever you do anything, the fruits of the action will either be desirable fruits, that is, fruits that are good and that bring good things to you, or anishtam, that is, undesirable fruits, bad fruits, that which brings a negative experience, pain or suffering or failure or whatever. And so a lot of work brings mishram phalam, that is mixed, partly good, partly bad. So some work you do and everything turns out well, and there don't seem to be any downsides to it, and so that's ishtam, that's the desirable fruit. Some work you do and everything goes wrong. We all experience that, and we experience it all too frequently. Whenever we try to do something and everything seems to go wrong, and so that is anishtam. But a lot of things we do, it's a mixture of the two, some good, some bad. We do something, and some people are happy about what we did, and some people are angry or upset about what we did. We do something, and we like some aspects of it. We're happy about some things, but upset about other things about the way it came out. And so all actions obviously fall into, the fruits of actions fall into these three categories: the desired fruit, the undesirable fruits, and those which are mixed. And then bhavati atyaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachit. So this is true of those who are not relinquishers of action. When they die, when a non-relinquisher of action, that is a person who's attached to the fruits of their action, when they die, they get the good, the bad, and the mixed fruits of their action. You know, it's often said, because it's the experience of people, it's often said that at the last moment in life, our whole life passes in front of us in very rapid succession. The experiences of our whole life just pass in a flash before our eyes when we are on the verge of death. So we see the good, the bad, and the mixed, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but the good, the bad, and the mixed. And so after we die, our future life is determined by those fruits, the good, the bad, and the mixed fruits of action that we have done. But it says, natu sannyasinam kvachit. But this never happens to the ones who have given up the fruits of action. That is, one who is successful in being completely detached from the fruits of action. They don't have this threefold karma of the desirable, the undesirable, and the mixed, because karma only works when we have a sense of being the agent of action and owning the fruits of the action. If I can either give up the sense of being the karta, the doer of action, the performer of action, I give that up, thinking either that I am pure consciousness, I do nothing, actions happen, but I do nothing, or I surrender to God. God is the doer, I do nothing. This body and mind are just the instruments of God, but I do nothing. Either way, if we give up the sense of being the agent, karma falls apart for us. We no longer are involved in the karmic process. Or if I can give up attachment to the fruits of action, then also I find that karma falls apart. So here Sri Krishna is talking about that second process, that if I can become completely detached from the fruits of action, then I find that the karmic process for me has ended. I no longer am involved in the mechanism of karma. So he says in the translation here, the threefold results of actions, the undesirable, the desirable, and the mixed, accrues after death to those who do not resort to renunciation, but never to those who resort to, he translates here, monasticism. That's the view of Madhusudana. But because Sri Krishna has defined sannyasa in other places, like in chapter 5, where he gives some attention to that, as not as monasticism, but as giving up the fruits of action. I don't think that he's talking here about monasticism. That's a later interpretation given by the Shankara school of Vedanta, but it doesn't seem to be consistent with the Gita as a whole. So I would say the threefold, taking most of the translation, the threefold results of action, the undesirable, the desirable, and the mixed fruits, accrues after death to those who do not resort to renunciation, but never to those who resort to the relinquishment of the fruits of action. And so then we come to verse 13, where he says, Panchemani mahabaho karanani nibodhame sankhe kritante proktani siddhaye sarva karmanam. So pancha imani, O mahabaho, pancha imani karanani sarva karmanam siddhaye me nibodha. Know from me, O Mahabahu, O mighty armed one, again an epithet for Arjuna. Know from me, O Arjuna, mighty armed one, the 5 causes involved in the accomplishment of all action. Sankhye kritante proktani. These 5 causes which are spoken of in the wisdom of Sankhya, that is, in the philosophy of Kapila. Now, some commentators have said, like here, he says it means the Vedanta scriptures, and that also is possible, because Sri Krishna is always speaking about Sankhya Yoga as his teaching. But some have said that he means the science as the philosophy of Kapila, which is in much of its analysis absorbed by the Vedanta. The Vedanta relies on Sankhya cosmology, but it doesn't agree with Sankhya on the ultimate truths, but just on the cosmology of this universe. So the running translation given here is, O mighty armed one, O Arjuna, learn from me these 5 causes for the accomplishment of all actions. That is, all actions have these 5 causes which he's going to name, which have been spoken of in the Vedantic scriptures or in the Sankhya texts, presenting the termination of actions, kritante, which have to do with the termination of actions. And so let's go on to 14, where he names these 5. Adhishtanam tata karta karanam cha prithag vidham vividhascha prithag cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. So here he gives the 5 the 5 elements of all the 5 elements involved in the accomplishment of all actions. So adhishtanam, that means the place, the locus, the place of action. That is the body. So to accomplish any action, there has to be a body. You can't act without a place, and the place is a body. Even if you go to other lokas, other worlds besides this world that we live in now, if you die and go to another world, a higher world or a lower world, there you will have a body appropriate to that world. Until you attain to the highest, you always have some sort of embodiment. until you attain to bodiless consciousness. And to do action, you need a body. Just as in the dream state, you are active in the dream state, but there you have a dream body. Without that, you couldn't run from the tiger, you couldn't fly up in the sky, you couldn't dive down into the ocean. The things that you do in a dream, you do because you have a dream body. So first you have to have a body, the adhishtanam, the locus, tata karta. Then you have to have the sense of being the agent. And the sense of being the agent comes from the ego, the ahamkara. I am the doer of this action. I am the agent of this action. I am going to speak. I'm going to sit. I'm going to stand up. I am going to walk. I am going to listen. I am going to speak, etc. So you have to have the locus of action, which is in a body. You have to have the sense of being the agent, karanam cha prithagvidham, and the various instruments of action. That refers to the 12 instruments of action. That is the 5 senses of knowledge, the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, the 5 senses of knowledge. Then the 5 senses of action, the grasping, the locomotion of the feet, the speaking, generation, procreation, and evacuation. These 5 actions, the 5 instruments of action, and then the mind and the buddhi, the lower mind, the manas and the buddhi. So these are the 12. The 5 senses of knowledge, sense organs, the 5 senses of action, and the manas and the buddhi, the 2 main aspects of the mind, the lower mind and the higher mind. So you have to have the body, you have to have the sense of being the agent, you have to have the instruments which allow you to perform the action. If you have no hands, have no feet, have no speech, you have no eyes, no ears, no touch, no smell, no taste, how can you do action? So you have to have these instruments of action as well. Vividhasya prithak cheshta, and the efforts, the various efforts. Now this, the commentators say, and that would seem to be true, the efforts here, or the activities, cheshta, activities or efforts, refers to the pranas, the 5 pranas, prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana, the 5 pranas, the 5 vital forces which animate the body and mind. Without the pranas, the body and mind, the body is dead, and the mind and spirit go to another place. So it's the 5 pranas which allow us to act and to think. So you have to have the body, you have to have the sense of being the agent, you have to have the organs, including the mind, and you have to have the 5 pranas which allow you to act. And then daivam chaivatra panchamam, daivam cha. And you have to have the divine element. Now that means, this is a peculiarity of Vedic thought and later Hindu thought, but it was especially important in the Vedic times, including at the time of the Gita. The idea that everything is guided by a divine being, a divine consciousness, a divine awareness. So the hand, the deity of the hand is Indra. Indra is the lord of the gods, the Vedic gods, and Indra is the one who who controls the hand of all beings. And then they're the one who controls the feet, the one who controls the mind, the one who controls the buddhi, the one who controls the taste, the smell, etc. They're different deities, and these are the Vedic deities, like the sun, which rules the eye, and the devatas, the directional devatas, which control the ear, etc. So all of the sense organs of sense, the organs of action, and the mind, all of them have presiding deities that control them. So Sri Krishna says that these are the 5 factors which allow for the accomplishment of action: the body or the locus, the agent, the sense of being the doer, which comes from the ego, the different kinds of organs, and then the pranas, the vital force, and then the controlling consciousnesses within these various parts of our being. That those all are necessary for the accomplishment of all action. Now let's come to 15. I'll see if we can come to through 16 tonight. So 15 says, Sharira vang mano bhiryat karma prarabhate naraha nyayam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetavaha. So Sharira vang mano bhir yat karma prarabhate naraha, that action which a person does here with the body, speech, and mind. So both in Hinduism and in Buddhism, actions are often divided in this way between physical actions of the body, verbal action, speech, and mental action. So these are the three large fields of action. Whatever action is engaged in by a person here, through the body, the mind, or the speech, nyayam va viparitam va, whether it is good action, which is advisable action or proper action, or it's viparita, or it's reverse. So whatever action is done by a person here, by the body, the speech, or the mind, whether it's proper action or improper action, panchaite tasya hetava, these 5 elements are the cause of it. The body, the sense of being the agent of action, the instruments of action, the pranas, and then the divine presences, the godly presences within the different organs. These are the causes of action. And then 16 says, Tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalam tuyaha pashyatya krita buddhitvan na sa pashyati durmatihi. So tatra evam sati, that being so, what I Krishna have just said, that being so, kartaram atmanam kevala tuya pashyati, one who sees the self, the atma, the true self, as the doer. One who sees the true self as the doer, akrita buddhitvat. Because of the imperfection of his intellect, nasa pashyati durmati, that person of poor understanding, of corrupt mentality, doesn't know the truth, doesn't see the truth. So the running translation here, since this is so, what I Sri Krishna have just said about the 5 causes of action, since this is so, anyone who, owing to the imperfection of his intelligence, sees the self, the true Atman, which is verily absolute, as the agent of action, that person does not see properly. He has a polluted intellect. So he's reminding again Arjuna of that theme which he taught him in the 2nd chapter, and from time to time through the Gita, but first taught him in the 2nd chapter through a number of verses, that this self is not the doer of any action. The self is the witness of all, the doer of nothing. It's pure consciousness. It's perfect in itself. It is the body and mind who do things. So as he just finished explaining in the previous verse, it's the body, the sense organ, the body, the sense of agency of the ego, the sense organs and the mind, the pranas, and the presiding deities in the organs, which cause all action, not the self. The self is free from all action. The self is stainless. The self is absolutely free. We think I'm free when I can do whatever I want. But doing is a compulsion. Doing is not freedom. So yes, that relative freedom is important. That doesn't mean that therefore enslaving people is okay, because that's not real freedom anyway, to be able to do what you want. So it doesn't matter if I enslave people. No. At this level, at this transactional level of society, then yes, slavery is a terrible thing, and the freedom to do the thing, to act, the freedom to choose, the freedom to make decisions, the freedom to live, all of these things are extremely important here. But eventually we find once we have those freedoms, the people who don't have those, they should fight for them. They should get those freedoms. But once we have those freedoms, then we find that I'm still not happy. I'm still bound. Then we see that just having an infinite number of breakfast cereals to choose from, an infinite number of cheeses to choose from, an infinite number of juices to choose from, so I can choose anything I want, a number of different ice cream flavors to choose from. That's not freedom. That freedom is freedom from the necessity to act, and freedom from action itself, action and reaction. Wherever there's action, there is reaction. And so freedom is outside of that altogether. Freedom is in consciousness alone. And when we experience consciousness in its purity, then we're absolutely free. Nothing in any world at any time can in any way affect us. We're absolutely unaffected by everything. And so that, of course, is a very high state. But it is the birthright of all of us. And so all of us will attain to that at some time or another. It's just a matter of practice and time. So since this is so with regard to that, which I have just said, anyone who, owing to the imperfection of the intellect, sees the self, the true Atman, which is verily absolute, as the agent, that person does not see properly. He has a polluted intellect. So we'll stop here. The next verse, verse 17, which we'll take up next time. It has, I think, by far the longest commentary of any verse in the whole Madhusudana commentary. He devotes 30 pages. Some verses he gives just one paragraph, a little bit on a page, sometimes a whole page, and sometimes 2 or 3 pages to a verse. But this I haven't seen. I don't think there's any other place that I remember in the Gita where he gives 30 pages to a verse. So we're not going to take it up with that kind of elaborate commentary. It can be explained much more simply in a way that is useful to us. But it does show the depth of the knowledge which can be read into this, and the depth of understanding which can illuminate this verse. So I'll stop here, and I will give announcements, and if there's a question or two after the announcements, I'll entertain those. So for announcements, on Thursday we'll have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class as usual at 11 o'clock in the morning, which will be, of course, live streamed. Next Sunday, there will be the lecture as usual, and I don't remember what I announced would be the topic, but there will be the lecture at 11. If you're interested in the topic, you can look on the website. And then next week, we'll continue the classes as usual. This class on Tuesday and the gospel class on Thursdays. So no interruption of the usual progress of classes right now. So let me see if Surenji is bringing me a question or so. Thank you, Surenji. Okay. So from Subhash, holding the body as in 811, is it the same as being attached to the body? Yes, we hold the body. We're all holders of the body because we are attached to the body. It's our attachment to the body which makes us deha bhartas, holders of the body. So yes, it's the emphasis is different, but the fact is the same. Yes. So is this in chapter 18, or in chapter 18, verse 12, is this the difference between sannyasi and tyagi as asked by Arjuna at the beginning of the chapter? So yes, we can assume that because Arjuna asks at the beginning of chapter 18, he asks about sannyasa and tyaga. So it means that he understood a difference between the two. So let me back up and say that in general understanding, the two are mean the same. Or sometimes sannyasa means formal renunciation and becoming a swami, a sannyasi. And tyaga can be just renunciation of anyone. But dictionary meaning, sannyasa and tyaga, they can be given the same meaning. But Arjuna obviously understood that there was a difference between the two, and Sri Krishna makes a difference. And again, it's not the only time he makes a difference, but here he emphasizes it in a different way. Where if you go back to chapter 5, you'll see that he discusses what is a true sannyasi. It is not one who gives up work, but one who gives up the fruits of action. So, does the fifth factor refer to the one divine which activates all the deities who rules all the different organs? No, at least that's not the way the commentators have understood it. Now, one, of course, is free to give different interpretations to such a thing, and so that is a possible interpretation. But the traditional commentators have said, because this was a part of the Vedic thought, which Sri Krishna's Gita teaching participated in. And this continued down through Vedanta up into modern times. So people don't talk about it so much because it's rather obscure now. But the idea was that there is a presiding consciousness for everything that happens in the universe. That's why the universe doesn't seem to be just random, that there's a presiding consciousness. And so the hand does so many actions when we're not even conscious of it. Now, of course, the modern medical or physiological or scientific explanation of that is that there's the autonomic and the, I've forgotten the terms now. It's been so many years since I used them. But the part of the nervous system which is under our conscious control, and the part which works even when we're unconscious of it. And so the hand, sometimes we're conscious of what we're doing. Sometimes the hand is doing things like we get bit by a mosquito. Sometimes we slap where we feel the bite even before we register that I've been bitten by a mosquito. So the idea is that there must be a presiding consciousness which governs the activities. So each of the senses is said to have this governing intelligence. And so the simple answer is no. What Sri Krishna seems to be speaking of is that Vedic idea that there is a presiding deity within each of the organs. Now, of course, it's assumed by Sri Krishna and by Vedanta that there is one divine consciousness, and these are manifestations in this world of infinite diversity. But it's not specifically pointing to that. It's pointing to the deities. At least that's the usual understanding. And then Jayanta asks, Shloka 14, does this mean that divine help is necessary in addition to our effort? Well, that also, Jayanta, that could be interpreted that way, but that's not the way it's usually interpreted. So the explanation I just gave in response to Subhash's question would apply here also, that the usual understanding is that it's speaking of this somewhat obscure idea to us, but this idea that there is a deity which governs each of the different organs. And so that's not a central idea to Vedanta. One doesn't have to concern themselves much with that. But if you want to understand Vedic thought and Upanishadic thought and the Gita, then it's at least necessary to have an awareness that there was this idea. So again, for our practical purposes, we don't need to pay much attention to that. But in order to understand the ancient scriptures, we need to know that that was a very dominant and active idea at that time. So I think that's the end. Yes, that's the end. All very good questions. So I'll give a closing chant. Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutastun Vandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sanghapada Kramopanishadair Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam na vidusura suragana devaya tasmai namaha. Om. We bow to that Supreme Being whom Brahma and other gods praise with divine hymns, whose glories the singers of the Sama hymns sing through the Vedas and Upanishads, whom the yogis see with their minds absorbed in that through meditation, and whose end and beginning neither the gods nor the asuras know. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.